Welcome to Fatima Today. I'm Carolyn Walsh. We know that in 1917, the Blessed Mother appeared to the three young children, Jacinta, Francisco, and Lucia, in the hills of Fatima, Portugal. She left with them many messages. She helped them to grow in holiness and to establish devotion to her Immaculate Heart. But prior to her visit, prior to her apparitions, there was the apparition of the Angel of Portugal in 1916, where the angel taught the children love and adoration for the Blessed Sacrament. Today we have Pat Stewart, a crew member here at Fatima Today, to share with us more information about that. We'll talk to you about the Angel of Fatima, or the Angel of Portugal, and what that angel taught to the children. And then also, what are the specifics? What specifically was the Blessed Mother asking us through her apparitions? Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's always wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about the Angel of Portugal, which is one of the lesser known aspects to the whole Fatima message.
Correct. This is kind of the prelude to the story of the apparitions that people are most familiar with. It actually, the first indications of an apparition occurred in the summer of 1915, when Lucia, then only 8 years old, and three other little shepherdesses were tending their sheep in the hills of Fatima. It was customary at the time for the children, after they'd had their lunch, to say the rosary. And as they were doing so, they saw a white light floating over this beautiful valley from the east to the west, heading toward them. And as it approached them, this light, this magnificent crystalline bright white light, paused over a pine grove, and they thought it looked somewhat like a human statue made of snow. That was one of the explanations that Lucia later gave for what they thought they had seen. But then the figure disappeared in the sunny air of the afternoon. The children didn't know what they had seen, but lo and behold, it happened 2 more times in the same way, in the same place, that summer of 1915. The girls did tell their parents and the community of what they had seen to the extent they could describe it. People gossiped about the event and weren't sure that they believed what the girls were telling them, and it, in fact, started to suspect that maybe something was wrong with Lucia, that she was behaving rather oddly. The following year, 1916, to which you referred, Lucia has now been joined by her 2 cousins, Francisco and Jacinta, who were then would have been 8 and 6 years old. She would have been 9. And they joined her taking care of the sheep as they grazed in the hills of Fatima. They were playing at a place called the Cave at Cabeço, which is near where the sheep were grazing. It was really kind of an outcropping in the rock where they could take a little shelter from the heat of the day. And while they were there at this cave, they saw a light over the tops of trees, moving over the valley in the same way that the light had moved the year before. And this light, too, advanced toward them. Lucia recognized it as the same whiteness she had seen before, like somebody wrapped in a sheet. And the form of a transparent young man appeared, of approximately 14 to 15 years of age, in a brilliant white light. And he said to them, "I am the angel of peace. Pray with me." And he prostrated himself on the ground and said, disappeared. The children were in a state of ecstasy. They couldn't quite understand all that had happened, what they had seen. And Lucia, who was always cautious by nature, warned Jacinto and Francisco not to say anything about what they had seen or heard. And in later years, she said she's not quite sure why she told them this. No one had told her to keep a secret, but she just felt that this was such an intimate and personal experience that they should keep it to themselves.
Right.
Later that year, in July or August was her best recollection, there was a second apparition of the angel. Now they were playing, the three children together, in the cottage where Jacinto and Francisco lived. And the angel again appeared and said, "What are you doing? Pray, pray a great deal. The hearts of Mary and Jesus have merciful designs on you. Your prayers and sacrifices to be offered constantly to the Most High. Offer sacrifice with all your power as an act of reparation for the sinners by whom he is offended, and of supplication for the conversion of sinners. Thus draw peace on your country. I am its guardian angel," he said, "the angel of Portugal. Above all, accept and endure with submission the suffering which the Lord will send you." And he left.
That's a tall order.
Enormous
for
order.
young children. You know, I just want to point out as we're telling this story, before we go on to the third apparition of the angel of Portugal, that these children, they lived in a community of tremendous faith.
Yes.
That their lives revolved around their Catholic faith and around their parish. So it was integrated in their life. One of the interesting and sort of very childlike things about them when the angel started appearing to them was that they would say they did the daily rosary, but they were cutting corners,
Yes.
like a lot of kids will, and many adults will. And when they did the rosary, they would say, "Hail Mary, Holy Mary, Hail Mary, Holy Mary." And so it's just kind of funny to think about how devoted they became to the rosary and how the angel was really predisposing them to that.
Yes, and as we'll see, this admonitions of the angel to pray and the reasons for the prayer were a foreshadowing of what the messages of Our Lady would be the following year at Fatima when she appeared to them. But as you were saying, there was yet another apparition of the angel in 1916 in the fall. The children were again playing at the cave where they were tending their sheep, and a crystalline light again came toward them. And this time the angel held a chalice in one hand and over it a host. He left the chalice and the host suspended in the air and prostrated himself on the ground and prayed, and he thereupon offered the children communion, blood from the host to Lucia, who had already received communion, and a drink from the chalice to Francisco and Jacinta, who, as I say, were only 8 and 6 years old at the time.
Right.
And in this way, the angel prepared them for the apparitions of Our Lady.
It's really a call for us to realize how we should be in the presence of the Eucharist. How often are we casual with the best of intentions in receiving Christ in the Holy Eucharist, and yet here is the angel, an angel who is far greater than us, far more intelligent, prostrate before the Blessed Sacrament. One thing that I think is very interesting about the apparition of the angel versus the apparition of the Blessed Mother is that, as you said, it was very intimate. Certainly the apparitions of the Blessed Mother were intimate as well. But there was something that really integrated into their souls that just gave this intimacy, immersion in God that was so profound. It left them almost in a stupor and almost in a state of exhaustion. So we wonder why those apparitions aren't spoken about as much, and part of it is that the children didn't speak about it as much as compared to when the Blessed Mother appeared to them. They were energized. They were given this clarity and alacrity that just opened them up and wanted to share. Now, they were asked by her not to share many of the things that she revealed to them, but I think it's interesting to see the difference.
Yes.
You know, that intimacy of receiving the Blessed Sacrament.
And maybe also because it occurs to me, the mission of the angel was instruction.
Yes.
To the children. He did not assign them tremendous tasks at the outset, he admonished them to pray, yes, but not in the same way that Our Lady does when she appears. She gives them kind of specific assignments and objectives.
Right.
But he's, I think, there to instruct them as a foreshadowing of things to come, to kind of prepare them for things that were going to be asked of them in greater detail. So perhaps his instruction was intended to be private for their own use later,
Right.
just a year later when it would be called upon.
Right. And so, of course, the next year we have the apparitions of the Blessed Mother. And as you say, over the course of 6 visits from the Blessed Mother to the children, she really teaches them and gives them particulars that she wants them to do. And any of us who have read anything about Fatima, it's that old analogy of the onion that you just continue to peel, and there is so much there. What she asked of them specifically was to pray in reparation for the sins of mankind, to establish a devotion to her Immaculate Heart. Those are incredibly daunting tasks. To bring about the conversion of sinners, well, I wouldn't know where to go to do that. She didn't just leave it at that, though. She left them with some very particular instruction as to how to do that. And we're going to share with our viewers today and with ourselves what those things were. And the most important thing, or the most known thing that came out of that was the Rosary. And we know that she implored the children to say the Rosary every day with strong meditative intent. So in other words, to really think about the mysteries and what they were actually praying about. She said, pray the Rosary every day to obtain peace for the world and the end of the war. Was a prayer that she gave to them in July that she wanted them to put on additionally to the end of each decade. And so that's a prayer that we say. You know, I don't know about you, Pat, but I wasn't born saying the Rosary.
No, indeed.
And I don't think many people were, unless they were truly brought up in a blessed household. To say the Rosary every day, it's something that many of us have grown to love and that we couldn't live without now, but we didn't start out that way. The Blessed Mother wants us to say the Rosary every day, but she realizes our human limitations. And if we just start, if we aren't saying it at all, start with saying a Hail Mary every day. And we hope that everybody will trust, because we can trust, that the Blessed Mother will provide for us the grace to grow in our desire to say even more. Before you know it, you'll be saying the whole Rosary every single day.
Right, and what I found too in my journey of faith and discovery was, it started to dawn on me, this is the Mother of God who's asking us to do this. Maybe I should pay attention and honor her request. And that, for me, made it an easier obligation to undertake, because I was motivated to respond, because it came from her. It was her, she who was asking us in a very personal way to do this for her.
Right.
And it does become something that I do every day, and out of joy and wanting to do it. It's not a burden at all. And
it's a beautiful thing to do as a family, though it can be very difficult because you have the little kids swinging the rosary beads around, not quite aware of the reverence that we should pay to those prayerful beads. And also, you know, all different types of things. You know, there are days you don't feel like saying it, but the grace that we receive through the rosary is profound. And she asked the children to establish the devotion to her Immaculate Heart. Her Immaculate Heart is the purest heart that we could possibly model after. And so by saying the rosary, we will grow in our devotion to the Immaculate Heart and be able to spread it even more. She said to the children, "My Immaculate Heart will be your refuge and the way that will lead you to God."
And her Immaculate Heart, as we've mentioned in an earlier show in reference to a commentary by then Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, who is currently our Holy Father, Pope Benedict, he points out that her Immaculate Heart is one with God, one that is that sees God And by a devotion to her heart, we are seeking to emulate her and to adopt that same type of approach to life.
Right.
And that is the objective to be achieved, oneness with God, by following her example.
Right. And through that devotion to her Immaculate Heart and through saying the Rosary, the benefits and graces that come just from saying the Rosary and just from that are played out in our own lives are profound. But it also gives us the grace to see, okay, I understand what is being asked of me now, how I must proceed. We are participating in bringing about the conversion of sinners and bringing about peace in the world just by doing those two things.
Correct.
Which is exactly what she asked us to do. And again, let's just reinforce, she left us with a roadmap. She gave these children specific things to share with us that is now our roadmap. It's the same as, okay, I'm going to drive to Philadelphia. You can use a map and get there in the most efficient way, or you can just go by chance.
Exactly. And she gave us the tools and all that we need to accomplish all that she asked. And so we're not left shiftless and wondering, how do we go about trying to begin, as you say, this enormous undertaking, and the key words being saving souls,
Right.
And later in her message, doing penance, turning away, which is basically just turning away from sin and turning towards
Right.
Jesus.
And making sacrifice. The sacrifices she spoke of. She said, make sacrifices for sinners and say often, especially while making sacrifices can be large. During Lent, we all try to make sacrifices. They can be small. It can be not sprinkling salt on your food at dinner. It can be jamming your toe in the door and thinking, okay, I'm going to offer up this pain for a poor soul in purgatory, for the conversion of sinners. Any tiny little thing that we can offer up participates in bringing about the conversion of sinners, which is beautiful.
Yes, by doing it in a conscious way.
That's right.
Just being aware, as you say, it can be foregoing dessert,
Right.
or, as you say, offering up some inconvenience. You're stuck in traffic, you're frustrated. Even the smallest gesture counts.
Right. Our whole lives can be unified with God.
Absolutely.
Our whole lives. She also implored them to pray. She said, pray. Pray a great deal and make sacrifices for sinners. For many souls go to hell because they have no one to pray and make sacrifices for them. This is a really sad thing. Now in the July apparition, the children saw a vision of hell, and she saw them falling in like ashes from a fire. People do go to hell. Many in our culture today don't want to believe in that, but through again the Rosary, through sacrifice, through prayer, the Divine Mercy Chaplet is a beautiful prayer. We may have our own prayers that we say to convert those who have no one to pray for them. There are souls who have no one to pray for them. As a matter of fact, one of their friends, I believe her name was Amelia, in the May apparition, Lucia asked the Blessed Mother, this girl had died. She was between 18 and 20 years old, and she asked about another friend of theirs, Maria, and she said, yes, she's in heaven. And she said, what about Amelia? And she said, she's in purgatory, and she will be there until the end of time because she has no one to pray for her. We have to pray for our relatives, and we have to pray for those unknown souls who have nobody to pray for them.
Absolutely. And also on that, I would just add that in a prayer can be the formal prayers and the formal ritualized types of praying that you've alluded to, but a prayer can be just conversation with God and with the saints and offered for an intention for salvation of souls. So if someone's feeling like they're not quite sure, well, how do I go about, what kind of prayer do I have to say? It's just opening your heart and talking to God in its simplest, having a dialogue with God and expressing your intention, and is perfectly appropriate as well.
You know, the Blessed Mother she's a mother. She's our mother. And just as children trust their mother, for so many examples, eat your vegetables and you'll be stronger. You know, the kids just have to be obedient, and they have to just trust. I don't like my vegetables. Well, you know what? They're good for you, and they have to trust their mother and their father that that those things are good for them, or habits of making sure that your clothes are put in your drawer, your soccer equipment is where it belongs so that you'll find it. Those are little habits that we teach our children that over time they see. They develop those habits and they know them to be good and true and valuable. In the same way, the Blessed Mother is giving us these habits to establish, and we see over time that they are good, that they are valuable, and that they orient us towards God.
Right.
Which leads us to one of the other things that she implored of the children to share with us, and that was the amendment of life. That she said, I have come to ask the faithful to amend their lives and ask pardon for their sins. They must cease offending God, who is already too much offended. You know, it is so difficult and challenging to have our lives entirely oriented towards God. There's a lot that we have to give up, a lot that we have to sacrifice. Maybe programs that we enjoy watching that when we really look interiorly, we know they're not appropriate. Books we read, clothes that we wear, we have to say, is this really pleasing to God? Some of us turn away from that when it looks like it might be too difficult or we might not be able to enjoy those things. But God gives us that grace.
Absolutely. And when you talk about degree of difficulty, it's interesting to me to recognize that what the children at Fatima endured during those 6 months that they were maintaining the secrets that Our Lady had invested in them as to what her requests were, and they endured tremendous pressure of society, of their families, castigation, criticism of all sorts, and they're tiny babies, children,
Right.
and yet they endured, and they changed their lives because they wanted to please her and to obey her, and that's the example for us
Yes.
to follow.
And you know, in a lot of ways, it was more an interior change than an exterior change, and that's what we need to remember. We need to get our souls right with Christ. We need to be united with Christ, which through prayer, through saying the Rosary, we can do those things. And the children are such a profound example of that.
Well, that's talking to achieving that immaculate heart way of life where you are at one with God, a heart that sees God and is in perfect unity with Him.
You know, one thing I'm always struck by, too, as I read about Fatima and the village of Aljustrel and where the children grew up, the aftermath could have been very profitable for these people. And yet, because they were very faithful people and they were oriented around their Catholic faith and around their parish, they maintained that simplicity. Even 90 years later, that simplicity is largely maintained, and yet they continue to grow in holiness, which is really an incredible inspiration for us. I think another thing we know that happened at the apparition, at the October apparition, is that St. Joseph appeared. And that's another lesson from Our Lady. Second only to the Blessed Mother is St. Joseph.
Yes.
He's a saint that I have come to know through other people who have grown to love him over the years, and I'm so grateful for that. He's such a profound saint. He is the only saint who appears at Fatima besides Our Lady. St. Joseph held the child Jesus in his arms, and he blessed the people. It is also the only approved apparition where St. Joseph appears.
Of the Holy Family.
Of the Holy
right?
Family and with St. Joseph. That is just, I can't implore people enough to learn more about St. Joseph and establish a devotion to him. He was the caretaker of Christ as a child. He taught Christ. He taught him his mannerisms, his inflection of speech. All of those things come from St. Joseph as his earthly father. Mm-hmm. And he was the protector of the Blessed Mother. If you look at that, the responsibility that he had, the trust that was given in him, through our Lord, is just incredible. And he is somebody that we need to have in our lives, always.
Absolutely. And as you said to me earlier, that this image of the Holy Family is a message for us to remember that the family has to be a holy place.
That's right. Holy families are, I don't want to say they've gone by the wayside, because they haven't. They're out there, and many of us are striving to become holy families. It's very important that to be a family that's oriented towards God, that we pray together as a family, that we live out the sacramental life, that we include as much of our Catholic faith, learning about the saints, reading the scripture, attending Mass, praying the rosary, or doing some form of prayer together as a family, but in particular the rosary, including Eucharistic adoration as a daily part, not a daily part of our lives, but at least a weekly part of our lives. Spend an hour in prayer before the Blessed Sacrament. Many more churches now are offering that. That's a beautiful thing. And allowing things to be restored to the proper order of God. Those things will come through prayer and through sacrifice in our own families. Really beautiful things. One other thing I wanted to mention with the apparition of the angel is that the angel usually ushers in some great moment, the Annunciation, allowing the Blessed Mother to say yes, to St. Joseph, allowing him to grow in his desire to be with the Blessed Mother and to marry her.
Right.
Pat, it's always wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
About Fatima, and there's so much more that we can learn. We want all of you to remember to wear your scapular and to pray the rosary, just like the Blessed Mother asked of us at Fatima. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week at the same time.
Our Lady of Fatima asked us to offer up our daily tasks as a sacrifice in reparation for sin. Pray the rosary every day. The brown scapular as a sign of personal consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Further reparation, First Saturday requests and visits to the Blessed Sacrament.